Are there? Hi, beautiful souls. Hi, welcome. Welcome to my channel. My name is Sadhana, for those of you that I haven't met before. Tonight, what's happening here tonight? So this is my weekly chat where I talk about reading tarot and other things as well too. All things kind of metaphysical, spiritual. And tonight we're going to have a look at lots of different decks. And I'm going to share with you some of my reasoning, some of my thinking behind. I'm just going to plug in my laptop so we don't lose battery tonight. About why I choose the decks I choose to read when I read, especially. And tonight we're going to specifically talk about reading intuitively and what that means to me. And I will share with you also some examples of decks that I think that don't work in that regard and why. So yeah, so let's get to the decks. And when you have an opportunity to chime in and say hello, let's chat on the live chat. So I'm just going to open up my Word document here because I was starting to make a list of the different decks, the different reasons why I choose different decks to read with intuitively. And that will help me a lot. But it's going to cover up the chat, so let's do that. Hi, Kyle. Yay, decks. Yeah, lots of decks. I also want to say that I really enjoyed Lisa's video this week. Lisa, Supportive Tarot, did a video with Richard from Tarot. I'm sorry, I can't remember his channel name. He is a great tarot teacher. And if you are looking for lots of tarot tutorials, Richard is somebody I found ages ago on YouTube, and I watched a lot of his videos. I really enjoy the way he teaches. And so maybe after this video is processed, in the description box below, I'll just put a shout out to Richard's channel because he's a great teacher. And so he did a video this week, Friday. Where are we now? I'm really confused about what day it is. A few days ago, he did a video with Lisa at Supportive Tarot, 10 top decks of all time or something like that. And each of them chose 10 different decks. So you got to see 20 decks. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, so thanks to Lisa and to Richard for doing that, because that was a lot of fun. And maybe partly that inspired me to do what I'm doing tonight and why I wanted to do what's going on. Also wanted to let you know that my list, I have a running list of requests for topics, and there's about 3 or 4 things on that list. One of them for sure is to do a live chat on the Suit of Pentacles, which I haven't done yet. And so that will be coming up soon. But if you do have other requests, please let me know either in the chat tonight, or you can put that in the description box below afterwards. So I'm going to start with, and of course I can't see my Word doc here, so let's move it over again. And I wrote down on the top of my doc here, like a big yes and a big no, because I think I'm talking about reading intuitively. So I guess I should give you a definition of what that means to me. And what does it mean to read intuitively? I think that is something that comes naturally to some people. I think it's a process that evolves as you become more experienced as a reader. So reading intuitively to me means to allow something to emerge from the pictures without being stuck on a particular structure or with traditional associations or with the format of the tarot. So if you have learned the Marseille format, or if you have learned the Thoth format, if you're an astrologer and you particularly like all of the astrological associations, or if there's some kind of structure to the tarot that you have learned, you kind of allow that to melt away and just allow the energy of the cards to come forth, almost like the cards come to life. And you allow the faces, you allow the flowers, the plants, the scenery in the background to come forward, whatever needs to come forward. So there's that part of it. There's also the preparation that I do when I'm reading, and I generally do this quite quickly. Sometimes I do more of a little ritual, a little bit of a ceremony before I start reading. It really depends how I'm feeling. So if I walk into readings and I'm feeling quite clear and clean, it's a sunny day and I haven't had any confrontations on the way to where I'm doing readings, or I'm just feeling really kind of light energetically, then it's going to be quick. But if there's stuff that's happened, I'm going to be a lot more deliberate. Or if I arrive somewhere, maybe I'm doing an event or going to somebody's home or something, and in that case, I'm going to do a lot more preparation. And the reason I do that is to shift the frequency of the place. So part of reading intuitively is to allow your intuition, which for me is a connection to the universe, something like that. To explain this with words is really difficult, but it almost feels as if a portal opens and you're just downloading. And you can be looking at the tarot cards, and it's like you see things you've never seen before. The things that come out of your mouth seem to be coming from somewhere else. Like, I've never said that before. I've never seen that association before. And it's like you're downloading constantly. So there's this kind of flow. There's definitely a flow to it. And there's no getting stuck on what was that again? What was that again? Oh yeah, what is if he's got blue underneath his cloak, it means this. And if he's got red on his boots, it means this. And oh yeah, if his feather's green, it means this. If his feather's white, it means this. If his feather's red, it means this. There's none of that. All of that kind of dissolves away, and the pictures emerge in a way that they just emerge, and you allow kind of the download to just flow through. And there's certain decks that make that really easy to do, and other decks that I find really, really challenging. So I don't know if you want to start with challenging first or what. I think maybe I'll just kind of let this go organically. I do have a list here on my laptop, yeses and nos. So I'm going to start with, good question. So I have done a lot of tarot study, and to tell you the truth, I never really, I guess I started with RWS. I tried to start with Thoth, but that didn't go anywhere. So I went back to RWS, didn't really like RWS. And so I went to Robin Wood. You've probably heard this story before. And then Osho Zen. So I had Osho Zen and Robin Wood. Those were my only two decks for a long time, like 15 years, maybe longer. No, about 12 to 15 years before I started actually collecting decks. And then I started to find all these amazing decks. I'm just fanning out these beautiful backs here. So if you know what deck this is. When I found this deck, this is the Line Strider. I'm going to have to see how far I'm going to have to hold these up. There we go. This is Ciolo Thompson's first tarot deck. And we'll look at her other one as well too. This deck has humans. It has animals. It has a lot of white space around the paintings. And actually, I didn't add that to my list, but I have a feeling that that is important. For some reason, there may be a theme, maybe not, but there's something about the white space, especially if you're doing a big spread. So that white space kind of gives you room for the pictures to come forth. So the pictures aren't overwhelming. It's almost like that white space creates a frame in a way. And Ciolo describes this deck as liminal spaces. And I think that's an important word to contemplate, what liminal spaces means. And if you are intuitive, actually, there's a few things I didn't write down that I am going to talk about here. So the white space around the edge, and there's something about watercolor. I have a lot of watercolor decks in my collection. And I feel there's something about when watercolor hits the page, it just kind of runs and dissolves and allows for a different experience. And it allows you to go in different places and different directions. So when I first saw the Lion Strider, I was mesmerized. Because here's the High Priestess, right? Oh no, that's the Queen of Cups. It's so beautiful. And when I look at these pictures, I feel something. I really feel something. Here's the Six of Pentacles. And there's a softness. And this is a really amazing Five of Cups. There's just something about this deck. And I use this deck, oh my God, how many months did I use this deck without anything else? For a long time. I used it for like 6 or 8 months. Like, look at this Death card. What it did was it allowed me to come to life as a reader. And I didn't define liminal space. So liminal space is that place where you are kind of here and you're kind of not here. And often when I'm reading, I like to take off my glasses and not focus too much on the pictures. My vision's not that bad, but sometimes when I'm reading text, I need to have my glasses on, which I will in one moment, and say hi to all you lovely people who showed up in the chat. I see Sherry Bug. So hi. There's just something about allowing the story to just kind of take place. And I think part of that is getting out of your head. And if you're the kind of person who sees shadows, if you see or you feel energy, or sometimes you wonder, you kind of feel things around you, that's liminal space. So the liminal space is the space between this third dimensional reality and other dimensions. And so when we start to blur our focus, when we take the time to do that little bit of ritual before we read, to raise the frequency of the room, to raise the frequency of the experience, then we have a much better chance of allowing that liminal space to present itself and our intuition to get really, really heightened up. So how do I raise the frequency? That's a good question too, right? And how do you raise the frequency of your reading rooms? I'm going to get to that question. I'm just going to say hi to everybody else who's here. So Brian. Hi, Brian. I don't think I've seen you on my chat before. This has been my experience too. Some decks just appear to speak louder, as if the creators put more emphasis on certain intention in them. Yeah, watercolor it's such a free way of painting. So I read sometimes at a store, at least once a week. And when I go into the store, there is a certain vibration depending on who's been in the store. I remember one time I went into the reading room and there had been somebody who used it as a changing room the previous day, and she had shoplifted a whole bunch of stuff. And the woman at the store, the retail person who works with me, had, thank God, let me know, because that's such low vibration, low frequency energy. And so I opened the door. There's no windows, unfortunately. I opened the door and I think she had vacuumed for me, which is really nice. So cleaning is really important. Sometimes we think, oh yeah, we'll just smudge, we'll just ring the bell. But actually physical cleaning makes a good difference, because that negative, and I don't like the word negative, the lower frequency energy, I think it does actually cling to the dust and different things. So actually cleaning does help. And then you can come in with bells and singing bowls and smudging and stuff. But just make sure that if you are smudging, you do have open windows and that smoke has somewhere to go, because it needs to go somewhere. So I do all of those things. And then I sit quietly with kind of a meditation, and I bring my body and my physical body into alignment, my energy body into alignment. I do some breathing, and then I'm ready to go. And then I clear my decks, which is easy, because usually I'm the only one touching my decks. Sometimes clients touch them, but not too often. So raising the frequency really helps to make everything else a lot easier too. So yeah, so Cielo Thompson's a pretty special deck creator. I have all of her decks. This is her newer tarot. I love this card. This is the Emperor. Kyle says, I just realized very recently, I've got my Word doc covering your comment. I just realized very recently that my intuition only really kicks in when I'm writing a reading. That is really cool. So when you are writing, I don't know how many of you write your readings, either for yourself or for clients. It is a really good way to get more depth out of your reading. And if you do readings for yourself and you don't talk your readings, so you just look at the cards and you kind of go, right? You're not going to get a quarter out of your reading as you would if you forced yourself to talk your reading and you forced yourself to put full, complete sentences to what was going on in the cards. And you can record that on your phone, you can turn on your voice memo, or you can type it out. And I find that doing it on the computer, because then I can write really fast, for me, that is a more efficient way to do automatic writing than to use my journal. But I do have a tarot journal where I write everything down. I want to show you a few more pictures from this one. This is a really cool deck. I have done a side-by-side of the Lion Strider, and this one's called the Otherkin. This one. Cielo. Her name is Cielo Thompson. S-I-O. And who does this card remind you of? Like, I just see like Noel Coward, or I don't know, one of those older playwrights. And the thing about the Otherkin is that, here's one example. A lot of the cards have half animal, half human. So there's this, not only do you have this, well, it's more obviously liminal space, but a bit of myth coming in here. And there's something about that really helps. And I'm looking at this image here, and this is a lot easier for me to read than a full color image. So when a card is saturated with color, it's harder for me to read intuitively. Why? It's because there's so much going on. And you know what I was saying about, I like these cards because there's white, not so much. The Otherkin has not a pure white border, but it's got, it still has that space. So when the whole card is saturated with color, I find it harder to look into the picture and like focus on something. There's a lot of tattoo decks like that. You know, like if you look at a deck like Bonefire or something like that, it's hard for things to pop up off the page because it's all kind of blending together. So like in this Nine of Pentacles, you have that gorgeous blue color, and maybe that will come through, or for some reason you'll see the head of the eagle, right? And that really kind of, that helps me a lot. So yeah. So that's one of the, do I have others on? Oh yes, there are other decks, of course. I pulled out another one, another favorite in this department. So Sherry Bug says, candles and crystals for me raise the vibration. Oh, for sure. Crystals. Do you clear your crystals? Like, do you, I'll talk about my crystals. I just realized very recently that my intuition only really kicks in when I'm writing. It's funny, sometimes the comments pop in, or maybe I don't see them when they all show up. Hi. Hecate. You told me your name last week. It's Paula, right? Hi, Paula. I think the color can also be amazing. Liminal space. I think about Margaret Peterson when I say this, that sort of color usage. I put my crystals in the full moon. Yeah, so crystals I find can really raise the frequency, and they raise they raise the frequency more efficiently if they have been cleared and cleaned and charged. I love to put them, like in the summer, I take my crystals outside all the time and I leave them in the sun on the table on the deck. I love the way they feel. And sometimes now you can go to the ocean if you don't have, if their Mohs number is high enough, or go to a creek and wash your crystals in the creek. It just feels so good to wash them in water. Paula, yes. Okay, good. I love working with a sense of sacred space. It's so important when doing email readings. But face-to-face, I can read anywhere. Yeah. So email readings are, it's really good to set that up, with a lot of intention on your table. Yeah, I do that too. So the other deck that I feel has the most beautiful liminal space is this one. You know, this gorgeous, gorgeous deck. And people complain about this deck because it's too busy. But this deck, much like the Line Strider, has all of that open space around the side of the card, right? The image doesn't go right. The watercolor is filled in the background, but the actual image doesn't go right to the edge. Like I find on this deck, there's plenty of space on the card where nothing is going on. Like I just love, this is one of my favorite cards. I love this card, the Six of Pentacles. And I think that's one of the things I really like about this deck. I think when people complain about this deck and they want it to be bigger and they want the picture to be bigger, it's because they're hung up. They're hung up on, what is that? What is that? What does that mean? Exactly what shape is it? And I mean, you can meditate with these cards and one at a time go for a little journey with each of these cards. They're just so beautiful. So easy to get lost in these cards. And so I think these three decks are perfect examples of the whole idea with liminal space, right? And to me, that is completely different than pulling out a fairy deck. So a fairy deck exists in a different dimension, right? It's a different space, it's a different place. And of course, these are a different dimension, right? They're not here in this three-dimensional world. But a fairy deck has a very specific environment. And I love working with fairy decks. I have quite a collection of them, but it's different than what I'm talking about here. this whole idea of liminal space. So that's one thing. And as I was writing this stuff down, I'm thinking, what is it about the liminal space that allows my intuition to blossom, allows it to come, like, allows it to light up? And I find that I feel open, I feel free, I feel inspired, and there's a sense of lightness. And when a deck turns all of that off, it's because I have to, it's like not expansive. I feel like I'm just coming in, like it's too much thinking. I'm really focusing on the image, and I feel restricted by the limitation of what's on the card. So one of those examples, and I love these decks, and I use them for very specific reasons. And I probably have about 5 decks like this that have very specific stuff going on in this world. So this 5 of coins is in a casino. And so this is Poppy Palin's deck, Everyday Enchantment. Okay, so here we are in the OR. There's a couple of cards in this deck that don't do that for me, and if they come up. So here we have a chef. One of the ones that makes me feel really limited in this deck is the real estate card. Do you know which one I'm talking about? This card, not so much. Love this death card. And so what these reality decks, these contemporary decks do for me is they make the reading very specific. And it's very hard when you see such a specific image to move away from that. I don't know if I pulled any others over here. I thought I grabbed a bunch. I'm not going to go get them. So I'm thinking about the Urban Tarot, new elements, new era elements, those kinds of decks where there's very specific pictures, very specific stuff going on. And what happens is my energy gets drawn into that. And it's like I start to analyze it. I start to analyze it and think, oh, yeah, how is that related to the such and such? And so I get out of my intuition and I go into my analytical mind. So we're switching sides of the brain, right? And I find some decks, I actually like to do that. I love to do it, especially if I'm picking a particular card, like any card, and I'm doing an analysis of a particular card, and I choose a whole bunch of that card from different decks, and I'm doing a study of a card. That's different. That is a really good way to do that. And this kind of deck is really, really good for that. You know, and not every card so much. Like this world card is amazing. You have all of these women from different cultures creating this amazing quilt of the world. It's just so beautiful. And I feel something completely different in that card than when I see this dude skateboarding. It's very hard for me to take this skateboard card and to make it anything but a skateboard park. Or when I see the tattoo artist here, it's really hard to quickly do that, right? So I think most of the cards in the contemporary style of deck, not all of them, but most of them have this aspect of limiting the intuition. So let me check with you guys here. Sherry Bug says, I think email readings would be difficult. It's actually not, Sherry. Do any of you do distance Reiki? It's distance Reiki and doing an email reading. It's the same thing. We energetically connect to the soul of the person that we're doing the reading. And all it takes is just a little bit of mindfulness, and it's actually really easy to do. All right, I'm just going to read some of these comments here. I think when working with crystals, for me, it's important that they are cleansed and cleared and prepared for working. For sure. I feel that way too. Like the crystals are going to absorb a lot of things. It's, when you go into a shop and the crystals have been sitting there for a long time, unless they're in the sunlight at the window or something, there's an energy about them that doesn't feel good. And the same when you're working with your crystals in your sacred space. Okay, so Shadowscapes is gorgeous in imagery with so much within each image, but normally what is relevant at the moment. So I find that in these liminal space decks, there's a frequency. There's this like there's so much energy in these cards. And maybe that's another really good word to describe a deck that makes you feel intuitive or allows the intuition to flourish. The other word is flow. There's a lot of movement. So the garments flow, the animals flow. So there's so much movement in this King of Cups. Not only is the King of Cups facing a certain direction, but all the animals are moving. The water is moving. The energy is moving. There's nothing static about Shadowscapes. Everything is in motion. And I think that I should write all these things down. I'm going to have to watch this back and make some notes. So there's the white space, or there's the not filling in the details in every little bit of the card. So there's some space in the card where there's just solid color, or there's no color at all, like in the first two decks that I showed you. So there's that bit. There's something about watercolor. And then there's something about the flowing energy, right? And I feel that flow of energy in both of Ciolo's decks. And it has to do with the body language. It has to do with the body language of the animals, the body language. Like if you look around the bottom of that tail of the mermaid, like things are not static. And maybe that's why this world card is easier for me to read, because it's also not static. There's a flow in the quilt, right? There's something moving in the quilt. So this is a really nice Two of Cup cards, but there's something, perhaps there's something to that static versus flow. So those are all important things. Okay. So yes, gentle fairy energy. So fae energy is very gentle for the most part. There's a few decks that are kind of scary. Let's have a look here. Maybe realistic decks can be a little too grounding sometimes. Yeah, for sure. Cynical as well too. It might be another word that I choose. Cynical, not seeing the light in the life, seeing a lot of dark. Paula does Reiki, nice. And assorted healing modalities. Assorted healing modalities, I love that. Yeah, distance healing and distance readings are pretty powerful. Hi, Whale Song. I don't think I said hello to you. I really admire anyone that can do distance work, whether for healing readings. It's a talent I do not have. Well, hi, Marwan. You know what? It's practice. It's practice. And I think once you get over you just have to do it. You just have to do it. And I think if there is someone, so you can start with like the husband of a friend or your cousin's boyfriend. Like start with somebody who you kind of know. And you can, like there's people you can practice with. I never encourage doing readings with family members or friends that you know well, but you can do it for somebody who's like one removed and just practice doing it. It's really not that difficult. So there's some more awesome emojis. Okay. All right, let's go back to my list. So under my yes, I've got liminal spaces, that other stuff I said, and movement. At the beginning of the video, at the beginning of tonight, I was talking about that 10 decks of all times that was on Supportive Tarot the other night. And Richard reminded me about some of the strengths of the Anna K. So this is the Anna K. This is the indie version. And there is something about this deck that, so what he said, he talked about movement and he talks about facings. So here, this is a really good deck for, some people laugh when they see this wheel, but there's somebody actually falling off, right? And the people at the top have got their hands up. It looks like a bit like a roller coaster ride. You can see the movement in the chariot. So if you did a 9 card and that there was a card up to the, suppose this one was in the center and then there was a card above or a card to the top left of this card, right? You have the chariot moving towards something. Now there's a lot of face-on cards in this deck for sure. But I wanted to, like this Temperance card is so cool because she's facing away and she's facing to something. And in this page here, right? So he's facing. So I think that is the strength, one of the strengths of this deck. Also love the small size of the cards. But I wanted to get an ace because I love the aces in this deck. The aces are, of course, they're not here. Okay, so here's the Ace of Wands. Right? And so by having, of course, they can get confused with pages easily, the aces, but once you've played with the deck for a bit, you get to know these aces, and they just have so much energy. I don't know, I really like them. And so this deck is really, really good for that. And I think that I did a video, so in my video series collection, in my series about my collection of cards, here's another ace. That one's not quite as dramatic as the Ace of Wands. I did one of the themes is decks that are good for storytelling. And I think any of the decks that I included in that video kind of work well here. So yeah. Okay, so Anna K is, he reminded me that Anna K was a deck that has a bit of fluidity to it. I don't think it's the best, but it does have that fluidity and it does have the facings. And when I am choosing a new deck, so I haven't bought a ton recently. I mean, I am always acquiring decks, but that is really important to me. And I learned that a while back, is that if you flip through a deck and all of the court cards are like this, and all the people are static and forward facing with square shoulders, it makes it really hard to read the deck. It makes it really hard to allow story to emerge. And so that might be a reason that I don't purchase a deck in the future, is because it's just too square. It's just too flat, too two-dimensional. So yeah. All right. Do you find that you fall out of your intuition at times with distance readings? I'm not explaining it very well, but maybe you get what I mean. So there was a conversation with Brian and Lori. Well, I can speak to that a little bit. So this is something I learned through Reiki. I find that it's important to this might sound crazy. So this, for sure, for Reiki, this is important. So when you're doing distance Reiki, I 100% believe that the person who's receiving the Reiki needs to be lying down, or at least sitting down. They shouldn't be driving a car. They shouldn't be talking in front of a bunch of people. They shouldn't be at work. They should be lying down, because at an energetic level, you are working with their energy body, and the exchange of energy is going to affect them, and it could actually throw them off. It could impair their driving. They could spontaneously end up saying something if they were talking in front of a bunch of people. It's a healing, right? So you need to be resting, and you need to be in a receptive mood, in a receptive mode. So when I am preparing for doing email readings, or I'm doing any kind of distance readings, I always connect with the person. Like I've got their question, if they have a spread they want, if I've collected all the information, and then I always find out what time zone they're in. And I try to, if I can't exactly find out where they are, what they're doing, I try to do it at night. I try to do the reading when they are asleep, or when I think they're going to be resting. Even one better than that, I try to let them know when I'm doing the reading, so that I can connect with them energetically. And I find that makes a really solid connection. And sometimes do you see me like look up to the corners of the room and stuff? It's funny, because when I'm doing these videos, sometimes there's stuff that's going on around. I feel like there's other people listening and participating in our little chat. Yeah, so let me know what you think about that, because I think that we can create these connections just by intention. And if we can intend and then meet that in our three-dimensional world, I think we can get really cool readings. So if you have a specific question for me, please put it in caps, or please put at Integrative Healing with Sadhana. All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was decks that, other kinds of decks that are easy for me to read intuitively. And I'll give you a few examples of also ones that are not. Okay, I had to repurchase this deck. Yes, Tarot of the Hidden Realm, because I gave a copy to my daughter. Now, this card, for example, matches everything I've said, right? We've got energy, we have flow. Energy plus flow. So that works completely. Again, here, like, look at the hair. They're making music. You see the flow in the hair. The hair's all moving. It's crazy. Like when you look at this card, the Four of Wands, and all that fire in the background swirling around. Yeah, I really love that. And I find that there's something extremely magical about this deck. Like when I pull out these cards, I just get sucked into their world. Like, I love this world. And I can feel her, the Fortune Fairy. I can feel her blowing that feather. And if you look at, this is one of my favorite King of Pentacles. Oh my God. Like, look at the young fae, the young fairy, and all that energy around her and what she's doing with her hand, with her left hand. It's almost like the energy coming from her left hand is moving her hair. And so when I hear people say that this deck is hard to read because it's all so close up, I guess I get that. Because when you have a card like this, it doesn't really fit what I said because it goes right to the edge. Everything's close up. There's not much space where nothing is not happening. But there's so much emotion. There's so much emotion, and I just feel all of that. So I don't know. What do you think about that? I don't know. I feel. Now, what about these aces? These aces are a little more challenging to read. Like if you don't connect with that energy, oh my God, it's getting hot in here. Sorry, I haven't changed from yoga. So if you aren't familiar with the energy of the animals in the particular ace, because there's the animals in this card are on the aces, they can be a little bit difficult to read. But look at this Four of Cups, all that flow, the water's moving, she's dancing, right? And the color palette in this deck is quite soft, right? It's not harsh colors, you know? So I find that this deck also is very easy to read intuitively, and there's nothing about it that makes me overthink, you know? Does that make sense? I see my name. Connection with the emotions in that deck is amazing. It seems as though you can have a conversation. Yes, I agree. Yeah, so I'm sure you've seen this on the tarot Facebook groups and things like that. Like if there was a tarot deck that you could jump into, if there was a tarot world that you could be a part of, which one would you want to be a part of? And for me, hands down, it's this deck. I so want to go here. I love it. Even the cards, I mean, there's a couple of cards that are kind of scary and dark. But I want to get to know their energy. I really do. All of them, every single one of them. They're just so beautiful. So beautiful. I have a feeling that, so this is my second copy of this deck. The other one's on loan to my daughter. I have a feeling that I don't know, this is one deck I'm going to always have at least 2 copies of, because I find it just makes me feel so good. It makes me feel so, you know, like if I'm ever feeling not great, it just makes me feel really good. So let's look at a few more, because I got quite a few on here and we're at 49 minutes. Conversation with the person on the card. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I have it here. Of course it's on the table. Yes, and I have wildwood on the tarot. I have wildwood on the table too. Okay, so let's have a look at Tarot of the She, because Tarot of the She doesn't check off all the other boxes I was talking about at the beginning of the video. It doesn't. Tarot of the She is the artwork is really busy. And there's a lot going on. But what it does have is energy. Energy and abundance. Thank God. This warrior queen, she's just so cool. Look at her. She's just like, this deck is so good. Oh my God, this deck. I haven't had this deck on my altar for a while. Dancer Princess. What skill to be on the back of the horse and doing that with your legs. Seriously. I know a lot of crazy yogis that couldn't do that. My favorite suit in this deck, I think, is fire. The suit of fire is amazing, and the suit of water. So the thing about this deck is it makes me feel passionate. Passionate. And so here we go. Here's a king who's facing straight on, but he's on a freaking dragon. He's on a dragon with his sword coming out of his third eye. It's just like so cool, right? Charging straight ahead in front of the full moon. Like, yeah, this is one of these. This is another. And you know what? I don't think I would want to jump into this deck. Maybe when I was 20, but not now. It would be too much. It would be too much. And I love the courage. This deck has so much courage. Like this card is just, so this is the Ten of Swords, right? So there's a sword piercing the third eye. And the blood is running out of the third eye. And it's a purification. It's a clearing. And it's so potent. It's so powerful. And I think if you sat with a card like this and you were having a really hard time with the Ten of Swords, or any card really, and you sat and you just, like, how many of you actually sit and meditate with your tarot cards? It's so much fun to go into the details. And I find sometimes, so my bedroom is kind of dark. The lighting's not great in there. And so sometimes what I do is I'll take the flashlight on my phone and I'll really have a good look at all the little details on the card. And then I'll notice something, like I'll notice a particular tattoo or something. And then, I don't know, it just feels cool. And then you just sit there and you close your eyes and you can ask the questions of the card, of course. Sometimes I ask a question, but what I usually do is I ask permission to enter into the card. It's the same thing like when I go into the forest and I cut down trees to make a wreath or something, I always ask permission to cut a branch for the tree. Like I ask the tree, would you like to be part of my wreath? Like am I strange? Like, do any of you guys do that? Do you ask the tree if you can have a cutting? Do you ask the card if you can jump into their world? Yeah. Sometimes I feel like a bit of a weirdo in that regard, but I like to do that. So I don't know what deck you're talking about, Whale Song. Maybe it's this one. Yeah. And did you hear my story about the backs of the cards? So I wanted to keep the keywords because I find the keywords on this card I love the keywords on this card and I don't find them limiting. So that was another one of my criteria for reading intuitively, was to not choose decks with keywords, because I find the keywords can distract you. The keywords can send you off and can bring you into the other side of the brain. So for the most part, 98% of the time, I'm not going to choose a deck that has keywords. But this deck, the keywords rock. They are so good. So well done. Emily Carding, if you ever watch one of my videos, I think you are amazing. And you did such a good job with this deck. Oh, I was going to tell you my story about the back. Okay, so if you trim this deck, you will damage the glyph on the back. You'll cut a little bit of the edge of the symbol on the back of the card. And being the person I am, I started doing it, and then I thought, oh shit, I've really messed with the energy of the cards. I've really I felt terrible. I actually felt terrible that I had defaced the cards. But you know what? It didn't. It actually made the cards, it made the shape of the cards feel so good in my hands, because now they're more a tarot shape. And I felt like the She were totally cool with that. They were not attached to me cutting off the sides of the cards. So it felt fine. Similar experience I had in trimming. So Druid Craft, Druid, I think it's the plant and the animal deck. So in the guidebook for Druid Plant and Druid Animal, it says specifically in the guidebook that that border that has the oghams in the border, it says that that border contains energy. And so if you trim the Druid Plant and the Druid Animal and the Druid Craft, you lose the energy of the oghams. So I got to thinking, I have 2 copies of, not all 3 of them, but I have 2 copies of one of them, maybe 2 of them, that I wanted to actually do some readings with and without the border on to see how that felt. And if you've seen my video about the Mystic Fairy Tarot, I think that's the one. I actually don't like the borderless deck. The borderless deck, of course, is more glossy. I can link some of these later. I don't know if I can link them I don't think I can link them in a live video. So Mystic Fairy Tarot. I did a side-by-side of Mystic Fairy borderless and Mystic Fairy with borders. And what happened was I think that those cheeky little fairies, they like that border. That border somehow contained the energy, and it felt like, I don't know, it felt like there was something about that deck really needed those borders. I do not like the borderless one. That was a really interesting experience for me. All right. Oh, okay. So we are talking about offering gifts. Tobacco, yes, I learned that from the elders in the Squamish Nation. Yes, that was Tarot of the She that I was holding up last. Yes, I say thank you when I find feathers, shells, old nests, and so on. Yeah, just before winter, after summer, there was a large chunk of a wasp's nest that had fallen down at the side of the house. And for the most part of the summer, it was a bad year for wasps. I was going around the house with the hose, kind of cleaning the eaves and underneath the soffits of the house, because that's the last thing I want is wasps nesting around the edge of the house. And I felt really bad about it. But I had a little chat with the wasp elders about not building around my house. And then at the end of the summer, I found this large chunk of a wasp nest, and I brought it into my altar. I brought it inside and I put it on my altar, just as partly for me too. Like, I find that with pests, so-called pests, it's hard to have a relationship with mosquitoes, wasps, and different things like that. I'm sure we all have different creatures that we have a hard time finding an amicable relationship with. And so I just found that by bringing that piece of the wasp nest into my altar, I was honoring the species. And it's actually still on my little altar by the front door. So I felt really good. And I will throw it into a fire eventually. Next time I have a fire in my deck, I'll probably throw it in there. So yeah. So I like doing those kind of things. All right. Buttons, honey, pieces of yarn thimbles for some reason as well. I am First Nations, and the linden trees, they bring good luck. So I ask for a blossom and gift it tobacco. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. I live in British Columbia, and we have, I don't know the different species of sage, but there's a lot of wild sage in the interior. And my daughter's always collecting it. And she's, yeah, so the people she goes out with, they do lots of offerings, and tobacco for sure is one. And they put other herbs down as well. And sometimes water. So people just say, just put down water, offer water back to the land. So there's an exchange of energy. I want to get back. I've got a few more decks here, but I just thought of one more thing. Exchange of energy. And we're talking about doing readings. And I want to talk about doing readings for free. And I've never talked about this because I don't do a lot of free readings. And it's not because I don't want to do them. It's because it's a whole other topic, isn't it? I think so here's an example. When I do readings at the store and staff want a reading, or the barber next door, sometimes he comes in for a reading, or the massage therapist upstairs wants a reading, the quick question, I ask for an exchange. And so sometimes they give me $1. One time, one of the girls gave me this little bottle. It's on my altar. It's so sweet. She actually gave it to me after, and she had some hummingbird feathers and a few little things in it. So there was an exchange of energy. And I think that exchange of energy applies across the board, And so for that reason, I will probably add, there's, I don't know if it's an app or what it is, like you buy a coffee, KOFI, you can buy a coffee for the person who's gifting you something. So I might add something like that to my website or to my chat or something, because I think it's important for the person receiving to be part of that exchange, right? It doesn't really matter what it is, but yeah. Okay. Yeah, I put spiders outside too. Anything that lives outside, I gently put it back outside. Okay, so let's get back to my list, because I have a couple more things I wanted to say. So under the no column, I had the reality decks, because I found that they kind of sucked me in. They created a sense of limitation. So when I'm reading intuitively, I want to be spacious, right? I want to feel spacious. I want to feel open. And those reality decks I felt that they kind of sucked me in a way that didn't feel expansive. Will you shout? I don't know what that. Can somebody delete that, please? Can somebody, Lori, can you delete all those, please? Okay. Thank you. Alrighty. Okay, we'll figure out what's going on with phase mots. All right, so let's get back to my list. So under the no column, that's what's really hard about doing these lives. Underneath the no was also heavily themed decks. So decks that, so something that came to mind was I have a few of the Alice Tarots. I have Dame Darcy's Alice Tarot, the Queen Alice. I have the Bubba Studios Alice Tarot. And I love, love, love those tarot decks because I know those stories really, really well. And there's something about the story, so the Lewis Carroll story, and the traditional meanings of the tarot. And I love the way that they kind of weave together. But those decks it's not an intuitive reading. It doesn't feel intuitive. It feels creative. I don't know. It's somehow different. So when a deck has a very specific theme, I don't think that those decks allow you to read openly and intuitively. And let me know if you disagree. So any decks that have a lot of theme going on, very specific theme, I think sometimes can create limitations. And I wrote down Herb Crafters. So Herb Crafters is a deck that I've really enjoyed working with because I am expanding my horizons, my practices with herbs, with making teas, with making juices and lots of different things. And so I want to understand that deck at a different level. I want to practice that deck. I want to take the cards into practice. And it feels witchy. It feels esoteric. But for me, it's a study deck. And maybe that's the level that I'm at. But that kind of deck is not an intuitive deck. I'm in the process of learning. And maybe that is a good key point. So if you feel like it's a deck that you can be excited about it, but you feel like you've got too much to learn, right? It's like a study deck. And I think that is not going to allow your intuition to flourish. Does that make sense to you? All right, let's see what's going on here. Hi, Jen. Glad you made it. We're almost winding up here. So, all right. So we had a bit of a problem with the troll here, but looks like everything's. Thank you, and thank you. Sorry, Lori, you had to work so hard to look after that. Oh, speaking of mods, has anybody seen Nina lately? I haven't seen Nina on chat or on comments for a long time. Have you seen her on other chats or anywhere? I was just wondering if anybody has seen her. Nina, her channel name is just Nena. So let me know if you've seen her. I feel like she hasn't been around for a while. And the other one, so if a deck has, this is under my nose again, if a deck has a system, so somebody mentioned the Wildwood Tarot, which I love. So this one. And there is so much crazy stuff going on in this deck. I love this deck. Will Worthington is just an amazing artist, and I've used lots of his decks in different readings, different videos and stuff. And I think on one hand, actually, I'll just get out the guidebook because I've got the guidebook right here. On one hand, if you are familiar with this deck, so you've worked with the deck for a little while, then for sure you can read this deck intuitively. But this deck has a system. So this deck follows the Wheel of the Year, and all of the major arcana cards have a very specific season. They have a specific level of consciousness. And this deck is so wonderfully layered and intricate. And you can spend a lot of time understanding how to weave these levels of consciousness in the major arcana with the energy of the minors and the energy of the seasons and the elements of the seasons. Now, when I work with this deck, the elements are completely different than my normal association with the elements. And so I am stepping into a completely different experience. So for me, the Wildwood is not an intuitive deck. It's a deck that I have learned. It's a deck that I've learned to respect its structure. And so when I step into the Wildwood, I'm stepping into the world of the Wildwood. And I'm entering into the Wildwood within the structure that the creators have created. So for me, it's not intuitive. For me, it is an experience. It's an experience it's an experience of what the creators had, what their intention of the deck is. Saying that, however, every single deck, you have a choice. You don't have to follow the creator's intention, right? You don't have to do that. So I'm thinking, for example, Naked Heart. Naked Heart on the back of the deck has a crystal grid, and there are crystals, and there's intentions for each card with crystals and how to work and build that in. But you don't have to use that, right? You can use it any way you want to use it. This is another deck that has a structure. And it's a structure that I am fluent in and so comfortable in because I am trained, I've practiced, I've studied, and I don't have to think about it. So when I see this card and that yellow ribbon, my brain isn't going like this. It's just like that. And so when you get to that point, so a few minutes ago, I was talking about like if you're using a deck for a study deck, and there's a point, I think there's a point where you have, I don't want to say mastered the deck, that's a bit egoic, but you get to a point where you really, like the deck is, you're fluent in the deck. The deck is easy, not easy. You read the deck with ease. Then in that case, I find that it can be read intuitively. But this deck definitely has a system, and there's a lot of random symbols in this deck that, sorry, my hair is all wound around these cards. Yeah. So these ribbons, these colored ribbons refer to chakras. Not so much not in the majors, but yeah. And one of the things I did when I got this deck, and I've done a video of this as well too, was to question. So I think Teresa Hutch is the creator. She did a good job. She did a good job with her associations. And I went through and very carefully analyzed every single card to see if I agreed with the chakra association with the energy of that particular card based on numerology, based on Rider-Waite-Smith. And I would say, I don't know, about 70% of the cards, I agree with the color of the ribbon. So if there's a card that has a colored ribbon that I don't understand, then that's going to take me to the intellectual side of my brain. And it's going to make me go, it's going to slow down my reading. So this is not a deck that I use for intuitive reading. It's a deck that I use when I'm doing a chakra spread, right? So specific intention. Yeah. So I hope that this has been of some help or interest for you tonight. Oh, I have a couple other decks here. Why don't I show you these ones? These are on the table. So I would consider this one an intuitive an intuitive, easy intuitive deck. Easy. And I pulled out the Fountain. You know, I got this deck because somebody on YouTube land really loved this deck. Somebody really loved this deck. And there's a few things about this deck. One, I think it really respects gender fluidity. I think it does a good job with that. But this deck also has a lot of motion. So there's a lot of like, this is crazy. The Six of Wands, it's like, whoa. There's a lot of energy in this deck. It's a lot of, I was going to say there's a lot of crazy shit going on in this deck. Look at these two babes levitating these two cups. Like, if you really look at this deck, it's really kind of something. Right? What is this Queen of Wands doing? Is she dancing? Is she floating? You got to know what she's doing. So yeah, so this deck has a lot of energy. Look at this. Look at this babe and the Two of Swords. I don't know. It's like, so on one level, so my first impression of this deck, I'm talking about the Fountain, was that it was icy. It was icy and it read flat. That was my initial impression. And then I went back and I wanted to give it another chance because somebody had pointed out how good it was with its is that the right word? With its gender fluidity. Like, there's a lot of there's a lot of genders, non-genders represented in this deck. Right? We've got and I respect that so much. I really do. I really think that's an important quality in a deck. And then the next part was I went back and I looked at the energy on the cards. Oh, and then there's my where is she? Okay. The Empress card on this deck. You know the Empress card in this deck? Who does she look like to you? And I'll give you a clue. She was one of the first, she really inspired me. She really inspired me to start thinking outside the box and to trust in my intuition and to allow myself to be exactly who I am, and that it was okay to talk about UFOs and it was okay to talk about seeing angels and stuff like that. Do you know who I'm talking about? The Queen. Who is the Empress in this deck? I'm going to show you in a second. I'm just going to look and see if anybody knows who I'm talking about. Who does that look like to you? Does somebody on the comments want to say? I swear to God, it's Shirley MacLaine. I swear to God it is. Anyway, she inspired me a lot. So when I was in my 20s, I lived in Japan, and I read all her books, and I did a lot of meditating, and I went to a lot of temples. And I just felt inspired by her. And she's the one that made me want to go to Machu Picchu. And she's the one that made me want to meet people that wanted to talk about UFOs. So when I saw this deck and I saw her energy on this card, I thought this deck was okay too. So yeah. So I've had lots of various impressions of this deck. So there we go. Kyle, you thought that was Shirley MacLaine? Yeah. All right. So that's a wrap. That's a wrap. It's been fun. Thank you for the mods for helping me out tonight. And yeah, so let me know if you have any other questions in the comments below. And if you have requests for other topics, then please also let me know in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Stay well, my friends. Namaste.